welcome back to I Completed 80s Music, your weekly recommended dose of 80s musical vitamins and minerals, with me, the pharmacist of pop, the 80s mixtaper. My introductions are getting worse, I'm sure of it. Today, we slip deeper into May 1982, and we have great number ones, polarising number ones, and our next playoff between two songs before two absolutely monster tracks end the episode. We also have our first galactic megastar moment, which I'm really looking forward to. But before we get into the music today, I just wanted to mention a teeny issue with the pod, namely the playlists. For those who have followed the pod for a long time, you will know that due to our lovely copyright laws, we can't play the songs in the pod. So to get around this, I've created playlists for both Spotify and Apple Music, plus a full track listing, which you can find in the episode description. The idea is I introduce the track, you listen, and then come back. Bit of a faff, but it works. However, I have got the best listeners on this pod, and this week one of them highlighted that a song had gone walkabouts, namely Wordy Rapping Hood by Tom Tom Club from episode 25.5. Now, it's still listed, but it's greyed out on the playlist, and I'm kind of bummed out by this, as it means it's no longer playable. And in the case of Rapping Hood, there is now only a live edition available, so I haven't changed it as it's not particularly good. It's so frustrating as it's a killer tune, one you must absolutely listen to, as Tom Tom Club is a vital addition to the story of the 80s. I guess that potentially the band have withdrawn it from the subscription services, which I totally understand, as even I, who have used Spotify and Apple to take this music odyssey, can see that there is moral ambiguity there of underpaying artists by using streaming services. And if that's the reason they've pulled their music, then I understand. But, who knows the reasons. Unfortunately, there isn't an easy answer to the problem, and I can't keep my eye on 500 and growing records. But what I would ask is, if you are listening and you see a track is missing from a playlist, do message me on social media or via email, and I'll see if I can replace it. You can get me on Instagram, Threads and TikTok as the 80s Mixtaper. Or if you're old school and want to email in, it's completed80s@aol.com. That's completed80s@aol.com. It would be a big help, and you're more likely to go and visit, for example, playlist 7 than I am now. So if you're new, please do give me a shout if stuff goes walkies. Anyway, let's get back to the music. So playlist 41 starts like this. The year is 1982. We are in Harrogate, North Yorkshire. If you've never been to Harrogate, it's the jewel in the North Yorkshire Crown, a refined Victorian spa town in the north of England that for one singular night in April 1982 became the epicentre of the European pop firmament. The BBC is hosting the 27th Eurovision Song Contest at the Harrogate International Centre. We're here because the year before, 1981, Bucks Fizz had won the contest with Making Your Mind Up. The atmosphere provides respite, almost at odds with the global tensions currently spilling over. The Falklands War had erupted just weeks prior, and the Cold War remains the defining frigid background noise of the era at this point. Amidst 18 competing nations, a 17-year-old high school student from the Saarland in Germany walks onto the stage. She isn't wearing a costume that transforms. There is no Velcro involved. She doesn't have a dance routine, and there are no backing dancers. She is simply sitting on a black stool, cradling a white acoustic guitar. She begins to sing a prayer for a little peace. This is track 1, playlist 41. This is also track 501 as we start the next 500. Press play now. We are back. That was Ein bisschen Frieden, the song that finally secured West Germany its first ever Eurovision victory after 27 years of participation. The girl with the guitar is Nicole. Born on the 25th of October 1964 in Saarbrücken. By the time she arrived in Harrogate, she was already a rising star, having released her debut single Flieg nicht so hoch, mein kleiner Freund, the previous year, which had reached number 2 in Austria. She was signed to Jupiter Records, the label owned by the prolific producer Ralph Siegel. Siegel composed the music while his longtime creative partner Bernd Meininger wrote the lyrics. The song's journey to the international stage began on the 20th of March when Nicole won the national selection Ein Lied für Harrogate. At the main event on the 24th of April, she performed 18th and last on the programme, following Ireland. The victory was a total landslide. Nicole received 161 points, finishing a staggering 61 points ahead of the runner-up, Israel. This margin remained the largest in the contest's history until the UK's win in 1997. Perhaps more poignantly, it was the first time Germany received the maximum 12 points from the Israeli jury. A deeply symbolic moment given the shared history of the two nations. During her winner's reprise, Nicole delivered a performance that became an instant part of Eurovision lore. On the spur of the moment, she performed a multi-language version of the song, singing in German, English, French and Dutch, the languages of Germany's former wartime adversaries, to underscore the song's plea for unity. Following the win, A Little Piece became a global phenomenon, selling approximately 3 million copies. It reached number 1 on the UK singles chart in May 1982, officially becoming the 500th number 1 in the chart's history. To this day, it remains the last Eurovision winner to top the UK charts. Nicole eventually recorded versions in 9 languages, including Spanish, Danish, Slovene and Russian. Nicole's career remained remarkably prolific following her Eurovision success. She's released over 25 studio albums and more than 80 singles over the decades. She remains a beloved figure in Germany, continuing to perform today even after publicly announcing her recovery from breast cancer in 2022. In 2005, Ein bisschen Frieden was voted the 7th greatest song in Eurovision history during the Congratulations Anniversary special. The simplicity of the performance, a girl, a white guitar and a stool, stood in stark contrast to the high energy, often over-the-top entries typical of the contest. It proved that a powerful, sincere message could gracefully move across borders and languages without the need for theatrical gimmicks. For track 2, we are back with Kid Creole and the Coconuts. Think of the zoot suit, not the one your grandfather wore in 1944, but the one August Darnell wore in 1982. It's virtually neon yellow, it's 3 sizes too big, and it's inhabited by a man who has decided that he should look like the greatest thing since the big band era died. Right now, the charts are dominated by synthesizers and hairspray, but in New York, a former English teacher with a master's degree is busy constructing a multiracial, multi-genre musical universe where the Depression-era swagger of Cab Calloway meets the sweaty four-on-the-floor thump of the disco era. We last saw August Darnell, our Kid Creole, in 1981 with the album Fresh Fruit in Foreign Places and the hit Me No Popeye, episode 25.5 if you're counting. While critically acclaimed as a tour de force and a musical odyssey, the sprawling concept of that record didn't provide the financial security his label ZE Records desperately needed. Pressured to create something more commercial and to relieve the label's financial problems, Darnell turned to his pianist Peter Schott. Schott provided a demo with a groove. No lyrics, just a vibe, and a single hook. It's a wonderful thing, baby. Intended to be about the concept of love. Darnell, leading into his flamboyant devil-may-care persona, changed the phrasing. He changed it to I. This is I'm a Wonderful Thing, Baby, our track 2. I'm a Wonderful Thing, Baby was the lead single from the 1982 album Tropical Gangsters, released in the US and Canada as Wise Guy with a different cover. It was the band's first major mainstream breakthrough, peaking at number 4 on the UK singles chart in June 1982. The song really demonstrates Darnell's melting pot philosophy, blending disco, Latin and Caribbean styles. The Coconuts, a trio of glamorous backing vocalists originally led and choreographed by Darnell's then wife Adriana Kagi, provided the signature sass and the three-ring circus concept. The rhythm section was bolstered by a stellar live band including the aforementioned veteran jazz keyboardist Peter Schott, bassist Carol Coleman, and reggae drumming legend Winston Grennan. Darnell later admitted the label was originally horrified by the title, fearing audiences would find the lyrics too vain. Who does this guy think he is? But the kid knew exactly what he was doing. He was playing a character, a musical trickster, and a satirical take on male boasting during a time of global recession. While Tropical Gangsters was a huge success in Australia, New Zealand and Europe and reached number 3 in the UK, Darnell's crossover success in his home country remained elusive, with the album peaking only at 145 on the Billboard 200. The 1982 European tour was a spectacle, with the band performing hit-filled sets at venues like the Edinburgh Playhouse and Glasgow Apollo, supported by Musical Youth, a band we'll definitely be hearing on this pod. The lineup on stage was a stunningly accomplished ensemble, including Bongo Eddie on percussion and Ken Fradley on trumpet. I'm a Wonderful Thing, Baby is the sound of a man who looked at the crumbling economy and the coldness of the Cold War and decided that the only logical response was to put on a fedora, hire a horn section and tell the mirror how good he looked. It was a subversion of the pop star ego, dressed up in the best silk suit money could buy. Next up, oof. Here's an absolute Marmite track for you. And for my international listeners, Marmite is a yeast extract you put on toast and you either love it or hate it. In fact, that's what the whole branding campaign is based on. This song is the equivalent of Marmite, despite being a number 1. It's possibly held in the same esteem as Shut Up You Face by Joe Dolce. This is a song that is a skyscraper of 1980s melodrama. A record so saccharine it makes a sugar cube look like a salt lick. Yet so deeply bizarre, it has achieved a kind of immortality in the halls of... Wait, what did she just say? We're talking about Charlene and her 1982 beer moth, I've Never Been to Me. This is track 3, press play now. Did you or did you not enjoy that one? I wonder. We firstly travel back to the 1970s and the sheer unadulterated ambition of Motown. Charlene Marilyn D'Angelo was born on June the 1st, 1950 in Hollywood, the kind of place where dreams go to get a tan or get crushed into a fine powder. She was a powerhouse vocalist who found herself in the orbit of Berry Gordy. She was actually Motown's first high-profile white female solo singer, signed in 1973 after she reportedly sang for Gordy on the spot in a restaurant. She spent years as Charlene Duncan, recording demos, including an early version of Michael Jackson's One Day in Your Life, before teaming up with the legendary songwriter Ron Miller. Miller wrote I've Never Been to Me, originally from a male perspective. Legend has it, it was about a man facing his own mortality. But he flipped the gender for Charlene. In 1977 they released, and the response was a resounding silence. Nothing. It hit number 97 on the charts and then vanished. By the dawn of the 80s, Charlene had essentially surrendered. She quit the music business, moved to England, married an Englishman, and was working behind the counter of a sweet shop in Ilford. She was selling sherbet fountains, not records. Then, in a twist of fate that feels scripted, a DJ in Tampa named Scott Shannon started spinning the old track in 1982. Suddenly, Motown is frantically calling a sweet shop to tell a retired singer that she was a top 10 hit. The song eventually reached number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 and number 1 in the UK. It's a song about a jet-setting woman warning a discontented mother not to envy her life of romps with rich men and Monte Carlo champagne, because even though she's been to paradise, she's quote-unquote never been to me. It is also, by almost every modern metric, one of the most loathed songs in existence. It's been called Velveeta in audio form and ranked near the top of the worst songs of all time by CNN, Blender, and music critics for decades. Listening to it now, with its earnest, unsolicited life advice, it feels less like a ballad and more like a 4-minute LinkedIn thought leader post from someone who just returned from a self-discovery retreat in Bali and now needs to tell you why your top-down view of a business is a mistake. And we have to talk about the spoken word bridge. This part was actually deleted from the original 1977 release because it was deemed too controversial. And I cannot find any detail on it. Answers on a postcard, please, folks, or email into completed80s@aol.com. The aftermath of this success was fleeting. Charlene tried to follow this up with a duet with Stevie Wonder called Used to Be. It was another soapbox song, a protest track about the state of society, and it was so heavy-handed it was actually banned by some UK radio stations. It peaked at number 46 and effectively ended her chart run. She became the ultimate one-hit wonder until 1994, when the film The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, used the song in its opening sequence, giving it a second life as a camp classic and a drag anthem. Today, Charlene lives in Fort Worth, Texas, where she teaches piano and remains active in her church. She even wrote an autobiography, appropriately titled I've Never Been to Me, which details her time at Motown and her journey through the industry. She remains the voice of a song that people either deeply love for its truth or deeply despise for its schmaltz. It is a record that exists in the permanent hangover of the late 70s, a glittery, weeping statue of regret that somehow still demands our attention. Now, next up, for our first time in quite a while, I'm going to ask you to play 2 songs in a row. The last time we did this was episode 25, when we had our memory playoff with Elaine Page and Barbra Streisand going head to head. Well, today it's the turn of the utterly brilliant track Our Lips Are Sealed, and we're doing it as a playoff, as unusually it was written by 2 bands of which 2 members had a brief tryst. This is a song which in the hands of the Go-Gos feels like sunlight hitting a chrome bumper on the Pacific Coast Highway, but in the hands of Funboy 3 it creates a visual of London's grey, politically charged post-punk scene, like a Rolls-Royce of politicians speeding along the mall for a secret meeting. It's a song about gossip as a weapon and silence as a shield. Which one will be your favourite? Play tracks 4 and 5 now. Let's start with the Go-Gos, because before they were the America's sweethearts of MTV, they were a group of women who barely knew how to play their instruments, emerging from the literal basement of the LA punk scene. Formed in 1978, the original lineup consisted of Belinda Carlisle, who had briefly been the drummer for the Germs under the name Dottie Danger, and Jane Wiedlin. They were regulars at the Mask, the legendary filthy punk club in Hollywood. They added Margot Oliveira on bass and Alyssa Bello on drums. They were a raw, amateurish and completely DIY group, as all good punk should be. As Carlisle later noted in her memoir Lips Unsealed, they weren't looking for fame, they were looking for something to do. By 1979, Charlotte Caffey joined on guitar and keyboards, bringing a much-needed sense of pop structure. Gina Schlock replaced Bello on drums, providing the powerhouse backbeat that would eventually enrich their sound. They were a true anomaly, an all-female band who wrote their own songs and played their own instruments at a time when that really didn't happen in the mainstream. In 1980, while the band was on a gruelling tour of England supporting the Specials, Jane Wiedlin met Terry Hall, the lead singer of the two-tone ska band. Despite Hall having a girlfriend back home, he and Wiedlin struck up a short-lived, intense romance. When she returned to the States, Hall sent her a letter containing a set of lyrics. These weren't pop lyrics yet, they were a sombre reflection on the pressure their brief relationship had caused and the tabloid-esque scrutiny within the tight-knit UK music scene. As we know from earlier episodes, after a spectacular rift had formed in the Specials and one particular Top of the Pops performance, Hall eventually left the Specials to form Funboy 3 with Neville Staple and Linville Golding. Wiedlin took Hall's skeletal lyrics, which included the refrain "Our lips are sealed," and reworked them. She added the bridge and infused the track with an upbeat, jangly California punk energy that masked the underlying paranoia of the lyrics. She brought it to Charlotte Caffey, who helped refine the melody. The Go-Gos recorded the song for their debut album, Beauty and the Beat, produced by Richard Gotterer. Gotterer had worked with Blondie and he wanted a clean, punchy sound. Released in June 1981, Our Lips Are Sealed became the band's breakout hit. It spent 30 weeks on the Billboard Hot 100, peaking at number 20. The music video, featuring the band cruising around Beverly Hills in a 1960 Buick era, cemented their image as fun-loving icons. In the UK, it was released in May 1982 and reached number 47. But then you have the Fun Boy 3 version, released in 1983, which acts like a Tails to the Go-Go's heads. While the Go-Go's version is a buoyant, sun-drenched anthem of defiance, the Fun Boy 3 take, produced by David Byrne, is a shadowy, subterranean exploration of paranoia. The technical differences are stark. The Go-Go's version relies on shimmering guitar riffs, hand claps and a driving bass line. It's built on a faster tempo that feels scrappy, that makes the act of keeping a secret feel like a victory. Conversely, Fun Boy 3's version is slower and moodier, incorporating an ominous rumble of drums, the percussive dums of the three men, and a prominent cello that adds a layer of emotional weight. Terry Hall's vocals, joined by drummer June Miles Kingston, express a sense of longing, a downright gloomy melancholy that is entirely absent in the Go-Go's energetic burst. Even the visual presentations were diametrically opposed. The Go-Go's video is defined by California sun and skip dancing, while the Fun Boy 3 video is bathed in suspense, images and gossip, even while the band play in a smoky club, reinforcing the song's darker roots. Where the Go-Go's papers over the angst of the effervescent fizz, Fun Boy 3 goes all in with the song's inherent shadows. For me, it's close. I like the high energy of the Go-Go's version, but the Fun Boy 3 take is just deliciously dark and moody and could relate to an affair, a scandal. There's just something very British. So for me, Fun Boy 3 just edge it. But I'd like to know which is your favourite. The song in my eyes remains a masterpiece of new wave songwriting. A collaboration born of a secret romance that proved silence is indeed golden. We return now to our normal format, but we end today with two absolute beasts. So let's talk about the first. The 80s has already made stars of Shakin' Stevens, Phil Collins, Sheena Easton and Adam and the Ants, but it hasn't truly made any solo artist or band global uber megastars yet. Even Michael Jackson still is a Billie Jean away from being Jacko, and trust me, that's coming up soon. But this is our first Kingmaker moment. This is the story of a band that decided quite literally to sail into the sun. In late 1981, Duran Duran was a group in transition. They had just released My Own Way, an interesting song we heard in episode 35, at best a stopgap single designed to capitalise on the top 5 success of Girls on Film. It was spiky, it was disco-inflected, and it was fast, maybe a little too fast. Keyboardist Nick Rhodes would later admit that the version they performed on Top of the Pops was at breakneck tempo that didn't quite capture the groove they were looking for. They were the poster boys of the new romantic movement, mixing post-punk edge with German-influenced electronics and a solid disco-informed groove, a blend they once cheekily described as the Sex Pistols meets Chic. But whereas Planet Earth introduced the band's sound, and Girls on Film told us everything we thought we needed to know about Messrs. Le Bon, Taylor and Rhodes, and My Own Way was the bridge. What lay on the other side was Rio. And Rio wasn't just an album. It was the first real Kingmaker moment of the 1980s. It was the point where pop, image and ambition became inseparable, elevating Duran Duran from Birmingham club heroes to cinematic global icons. It was the moment all the other bands, milliners, fashion designers, artists, interior designers and everyone else creative collectively said, "Oh shit, we should be doing that." The first song released from the album was Hungry Like the Wolf. This is our track 6 today, Press play now. That was Hungry Like the Wolf, and if you wanted to know what the second British invasion sounded like in 1982, that was the ground zero frequency. The song was written and recorded in a single day at the basement studio of EMI's Manchester Square headquarters in London. It was a Saturday afternoon in early 1982. Nick Rhodes and Simon Le Bon had arrived with what Rhodes described as a terrible hangover, and they decided the only cure was to throw themselves into the music. Rhodes had the idea for the backing track while in the car on the way over. He started fiddling with the new technology of the era, a Roland Jupiter 8 synthesizer and a TR-808 drum machine. He linked the 808 with the sequencer to create that iconic rhythmic thread. While Rhodes was futzing with the keys, Simon Le Bon was in the corner with his notebook, pulling from a title he'd jotted down, Hungry Like the Wolf. Le Bon later revealed the lyrics were loosely inspired by the fairy tale Little Red Riding Hood. He'd also been thinking about Jim Morrison's Lizard King persona. By the time the rest of the band arrived that afternoon, the core of the song was already there. Guitarist Andy Taylor added a Mark Bolan-ish guitar lick, a raw Marshall-sounding Les Paul part that gave the polished synth pop the necessary rock edge. Bassist John Taylor and drummer Roger Taylor added the rhythm section, with Roger utilising his Simmons electronic drums for those explosive fills. And that laugh at the very beginning, that was Nick Rhodes' girlfriend at the time, Cheryl, who was also responsible for the moans on the song's fade-out. The band eventually re-recorded the track with producer Colin Thurston at George Martin's Air Studios. Thurston whittled their wall of ideas down to its essential elements, though they kept the original electronic backing track from the demo because they knew they had captured lightning in a bottle. But the song's global kingmaker status wasn't achieved in the studio. It was forged in the jungles of Sri Lanka. Directed by Russell Mulcahy, the music video was a cinematic fever dream inspired by Raiders of the Lost Ark and Apocalypse Now. It featured Le Bon in a khaki fedora pursuing a tiger-like woman through markets and rivers. There's a reason Le Bon wears a hat for much of it. A stylist had botched his blonde highlights the night before, turning his hair a vivid orange. This was the video that broke them in America. MTV, then still a fledgling cable channel, put the clip into heavy rotation. Suffice to say, it was an early sensation. Les Garland, an MTV executive, famously recalled an employee running into his office saying, "You have got to see this video. It's the greatest video I've ever seen." The success of the video propelled the single to number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 and helped the album Rio crack the top 10. In 1984, the band won the very first Grammy for Best Short Form Music Video for Hungry Like the Wolf and Girls on Film. Rio had transformed them. They were no longer just a band, they were an aesthetic. The Patrick Nagel cover art, the exotic locations, and the sophisticated synth-pop sound became the definitive blueprint for the 1980s. As Nick Rhodes later reflected, Rio was what set us on our trajectory for not only the next decade, but really the rest of our career. Let's end today with another act doubling down on their success by dropping another monster. And monster is the most fitting word to use here. The last time we checked in with Iron Maiden, it was 1982, and they were busy conquering the charts with Run to the Hills. You might remember that track in episode 37.5 for its galloping Steve Harris bass line and its harrowing lyrical perspective on the displacement of indigenous peoples. But today, we're moving past the hills, we're heading into the dark, into the flickering shadows of a rainy London night, and into the middle of a moral panic that would define metal in the 80s. It begins like this, and I'm going to give my best impression here. Woe to you, O earth and sea, for the devil sends the beast with wrath, because he knows the time is short. Let him who hath understanding reckon the number of the beast, for it is a human number. Its number is 666. But here is a bit of British TV trivia for your next pub quiz. The man who provided the dramatic spoken word intro was none other than Barry Clayton. If that deep, resonant authority sounds familiar to a certain generation of kids, it's because Clayton was also the narrator for the cult classic animated series Count Duckula. From ritualistic Satanism to a vegetarian vampire duck living in Transylvania, it's fair to say Barry had range. This is Number of the Beast, track 7, our final song today. We return to find a band looking to build on recent successes. Bruce Dickinson had recently replaced Paul Di'Anno, bringing an air raid siren vocal range that changed the band's DNA. They were recording at Battery Studios in London with producer Martin Birch, and the pressure was on. Steve Harris, the band's founder and primary songwriter, didn't find inspiration in a satanic ritual or a grimoire. He found it in a nightmare. Specifically, Harris had watched the 1978 film Damien Omen 2 late at night. That cinematic dread, combined with the imagery of Robert Burns' poem Tam O'Shanter, swirled together in his subconsciousness. He woke up and started writing about a man stumbling upon a black mass in the woods, paralysed by the sight of red glowing eyes and things going on that shouldn't be happening. The famous spoken word intro to the song, the citation of Revelations 12:12 and 13:18, wasn't supposed to be an anonymous actor. The band actually reached out to horror legend Vincent Price. Price, ever the professional, reportedly demanded $25,000 for the session. The band, being young and somewhat thrifty, declined and hired Barry Clayton instead. Clayton was told to put on his best Vincent Price voice, and he nailed it so effectively that many fans spent decades convinced it was actually Price. Re-recording the track was a nightmare of its own. Martin Birch was a perfectionist. He famously pushed Dickinson to sing the opening scream over and over for hours. Dickinson was so frustrated by the endless takes that he eventually kicked chairs and smashed things in the studio. That legendary glass-shattering wail at the start of the track is literally the sound of a man who has reached his absolute breaking point. Then there were the supernatural occurrences. During the recording sessions, the band reported lights flickering on and off and equipment behaving strangely. The icing on the cake, producer Martin Birch got into a car accident with a van carrying a group of nuns. When he took his car to the shop for repairs, the bill came exactly to £666. Birch, understandably rattled, insisted on paying $667. The fans didn't just listen, they bought it in droves. In their native UK, the Number of the Beast album smashed its way to number 1 on the official albums chart on the 10th of April 1982. It wasn't just a flash in the pan either. It held that top spot for 2 weeks and stayed in the top 75 for a massive 31 weeks. The title track itself peaked at number 18 on the UK singles chart during its original run, though it would famously reach number 3 years later during a 2005 reissue. Overseas, the Beast was just as hungry. In the United States, despite or perhaps because of the Satanic Panic, the album became their first to crack the top 40 of the Billboard 200, peaking at 33. It eventually went platinum there, selling over 1 million copies. Across the globe, it hit the top 10 in 8 different countries, including number 3 in Austria, number 7 in Sweden, and reaching as far as number 8 in Australia and 11 in Canada. Iron Maiden hadn't just arrived, they had conquered. But when the song was released, the backlash was swift, especially in the United States. Religious groups burned copies of the album, and protesters followed the band on tour. They missed the point entirely, of course. The song isn't an invitation to worship the devil. It's a first-person narrative about the fear of the occult. It's a ghost story set to a gallop. Iron Maiden weren't Satanists. They were just guys who liked horror movies and high-octane riffs. So that is the halfway point of playlist 41, and what a fun playlist it's been so far. Hope you're enjoying it, the last two tracks especially. But coming up in the second half next week, the hits really keep on coming. ABC give us the look of love. We introduce the Gang of Four. We get more from Toya. New Order start to sound like New Order. And yet again we end with two monsters, one from Madness and one from Adamant. If you're enjoying the show and want to help with the show's production costs, you can buy me a coffee on my Buy Me a Coffee link in the episode description. All contributions gratefully welcomed. And as usual, if you can subscribe and drop a review on your pod platform of choice, it all helps. I hope you have a lovely week, and we'll see you next time on I Completed 80s Music. Take care.